Thank you. In the spirit of keeping this thing actually live, I literally have a list of links that I'm going to run through. I will not be talking about GitHub stuff today, but we'll be doing a lot of stuff on GitHub. If you want to ask questions, come find me after the talk, because we have lunch. So, for reference, I'm going to walk through a few projects that I'm actively maintaining. Reactive Extensions, OctoKit, up for grabs. They're the ones that are most active at the moment, so they're the ones I'm going to go through. So for the first one, I'm going to find my links. So just a heads up, there was some availability issues with GitHub today. Hopefully the demo gods are good to me, but we shall see. So about a month ago, this blog post came up. Reactive Extensions for .NET is one of the kind of the old school open source projects that have been published out by Microsoft. And ultimately, I've now become a member of the core team. There's a whole backstory behind this, which I'll explain quickly. About last year, in I think November, fantastic. November last year, people started asking for core CLR support, or what would become .NET Core. And this was in November, and if you look through the list, ultimately, you don't see anyone from the team talking about this stuff. And so Reactive Extensions for .NET had kind of languished for a while. And so myself and Oren Novotny and Christian and a few other people, we kind of teamed up to put in .NET Core support. And so we can see the PR that started this off. Did you do that click? So I managed to nerd snipe Christian into opening up this PR to get started. We got a bit of interest in it, but ultimately there were other issues that we had to work through. It was owned by an entity that wouldn't take contributions from the community. For things like pull requests, they weren't really taking them in as well. It was open source, but it wasn't really an open source community around the stuff. And there were the typical things that come up with projects, like lots of stale issues. And so ultimately, Oren and I have come on board to help move this thing along and turn it into a real community effort. So as part of doing this, I've been, basically, one of my goals is to nerd snipe other people into getting involved. So I'm going to do a couple of examples here and talk more about the stuff from the maintainer side. So this was an issue that came up yesterday, a lovely little sample here. Unfortunately, it's okay in terms of like a bug report. There's some details around what happens and what the workaround is, but I kind of want to nudge this person to turn it into an actual test so that I can then drop that into the project and see what's going on. I don't like the workaround that's there. I'd rather actually get it fixed. So let's type that up now. So in terms of speaking about generalities, I like to kind of either talk about myself, if there's something relevant to me, or I like to talk about the royal we. I don't like to pick on people when they're doing things that aren't quite up to scratch or not quite what I expect, and so I'm just going to refer to me. But actually, so I've called out you there, and I think that's okay. So if you have a look at the sample here, there's like an observer.create with bytes. I'm not quite sure how he's using this and how it's set up, so I think there's some details that I can kind of just nudge him towards. Next one on my list. Beautiful. So this one I got involved in fairly early on. We were talking about the behaviors of the internals of RX. I argued that stuff was by design. He came back and said it wasn't. Eventually I came around to his viewpoint. But then other people jumped in and discussed workarounds. Of course, this was a month ago sort of thing. And I haven't heard anything about whether this thing needs to be fixed. As part of doing the Reactive Extensions 3.0 release, we're now looking to kind of come back and revisit these old bugs. So I'm going to drop in a note here to say, so the author, Glopes. So everyone seems to be happy about the workarounds. Nothing's been discussed for like a month. I'm just going to say, do we care about this anymore? Because ultimately, the less work I have to do, the more happier I'm going to be. this one. So this one goes back to 2014, not long after the source for Reactive Extensions was made available. RX Dave, I'd love to meet him someday, maybe I have. Ultimately, he's gone through all these details and then nothing has happened. So to summarize, first comment shows this behavior here when something throws, it's actually being swallowed by RX. For sake of correctness, maybe we should look at this. Lots of big words in here like concurrency, synchronous execution. I'm going to come in here and say, so again, just kind of saying, is this something you still care about? Do we still want, are we able to recreate this in the latest release? Like just nudging people down that path to see if they do still want to participate. And of course, I'm not going to go through all the issues on the Reactive Extensions project today, because that's kind of boring, but this is the little way that I like to nerd snipe people into getting involved. Like, yes, there is a way to kind of report a bug, but then actually pulling them through the process isn't actually as hard as people think. So I've dropped a little note in here to do a little rant about what makes a good quality bug report. And I have this little 5-star system that comes up. So 1 star, you tell me it doesn't work. That's cool. We can then go through and understand your situation a bit better. You get 2 stars if you say, I used X, Y, Z, and it doesn't work. Again, more information is already present. That's great. I used X, Y, Z, and got an error code, an error of some sort. So we're getting more information out of the user. We go further down, and I used X, Y, Z, and found, got error, have workaround. So this is definitely me kind of nudging the user to show a bit more initiative with this stuff, because rather than going back and forth, having more details up front definitely helps me come back and say, oh, you've found so-and-so issue, or you found so-and-so. I've got some better ones on the OctoKit side, which kind of go through this, but for now I just wanted to kind of summarize my list. And the last one is ultimately the user finds the fix. If I could type X, Y, Z. Of course, you know, the 5-star one is like, you don't need to bug me about anything. You dug in, you found the problem, here's a fix for it. Like, that's where I would love people to be, because ultimately I only have so many hours in the day to do anything. So yes, the less. And for the joke, we have negative star, which is complaining on Twitter. We all do it, don't lie. I definitely do it. And yeah, this is something that I've been conscious of the more that I do the maintenance side of things, and ultimately I try and avoid doing that, but sometimes it is still okay to vent. All right. So on the upside of taking over RX is we've got a whole bunch of contributions coming in. This is, I'm not going to merge my own PR, but ultimately I opened this up yesterday because of a discussion with one of my colleagues, Stephen, who was here. We were talking about switching out the immutable list. Hey, Stephen. We were talking about switching out immutable list for the one that ships in the BCL. And so I thought, like, you know, beautiful, it's 9 changes. We delete a whole bunch of code. That sounds fantastic. Then Dennis, one of the contributors on another project, jumps up and says, hey, this thing is actually really, really slow. So we go back and forth and work out what is going on here. You know, Oren asks if there's, you know, this has been reported elsewhere. Ultimately, I'm just going to come in here and say, I'm going to put it aside. So having PRs hang around is definitely a habit, again, that I do a lot of, that I kind of try and reduce. The term that I've heard about this is called psychic debt. Open PRs, they're just there, they need to be addressed at some point. Taking things off your plate is definitely great for the sanity, and so I'm going to do that now. I'm going to leave the branch, I'm not going to delete it, but ultimately I don't need this thing to be reviewed by anyone else, because ultimately it's at a state where we need to investigate more. What am I doing for time? Cool. Another PR we've got here, this one here was from Oren, fixing up a certain issue, using Volatile Read for dealing with deadlocks. Ultimately, this seems like a reasonable thing to do. I came in here and thumbs upped it. So at this point, we've got like a certain number of milestones. So this is a point fix that we're trying to do all the stuff that we didn't do for the .NET Core 1.0 release. And so it's a 3-line fix. Merge that in, everything's hunky-dory. Clean up the branch. Yeah, so we're at the point now where we just kind of need to move things forward in terms of improving things, bug fixes, things like that. And I think by us leading by example, we'll then get other people who are going to chime in with fixes and things on their own. I think there was one more PR here. Yes. So side note, if you do run into a project that I'm looking after, that's the point where I'm actually looking at stuff. I use that to say, like, I'm actually reviewing this, but for things that aren't on my list, I'm not currently looking at them. And I think this one here was also nice. Someone was requesting some methods be made public so that they can then be used elsewhere. Oren was in there for thumbs up, so again, just come in and merge. Beautiful. The next project that I've got is the OctoKit side of things. So if you're doing stuff with the GitHub API and you don't want to learn all the ins and outs of hypermedia, the .NET wrapper is the one that we've got here. So hit that project site. The thing that I love about this project is that we're up to that number of contributions. We've only been going for about 2 years now, but ultimately we've put things in a way that it's very easy for someone to jump in and submit a little PR for something. And if we look at the breakdown of the contributions, so Dampier is Alexander. He's doing some Google Summer of Code with me at the moment. You see the famous hack who couldn't make it this week. And as you go down the list, there's just people piling in PRs. Yeah, I love this project because of just the sheer variety of people that come in. I also love that more and more people are starting to use it. So Scott Hanselman mentioned in his keynote yesterday, come on, internets, the graphing of all the contributions for .NET Core. I found out from the blog post that they were using OctoKit.NET, and that just warms my heart. The downside of more people using my project is that they keep finding things. So a couple of fun ones that have come up recently. I will put that one aside for the moment. Issue clients, so the ability to kind of get issue events through the API. Someone's found this lovely thing to do with rate limiting, and we're kind of going back and forth on this stuff. There's lots of words from Ryan, the other core person, and myself. This is going to be in the too hard pile. I'm not going to magically fix this today, but there are more people use this stuff, the more deeper they go with things like performance and correctness of the API. Because even though we are just a wrapper on top of the actual GitHub API, there are things that we do that might not actually be correct. Let's put it that way. So 1412, yep. So in terms of like bug reports that aren't great, this one came up last week. If you want to really grab my attention on an issue, just say something is impossible. That's just, it sets me off, and of course I dove into this one almost immediately just to prove him wrong. We go through, so the thing that was really frustrating about this one is that we danced around a whole bunch of things. We didn't really get a good repro out for what the problem was. I chimed in a little bit later, kind of encouraging the person to go through, stepping through the source, because we have that support with OctoKit. We go back and forth. You can kind of see through this that I'm getting kind of, I wouldn't say angry, but definitely getting more emotional about this stuff, because I wanted to kind of understand the situation. And ultimately, I said, this is my repro, it works for me. Does it work for you? Again, I couldn't get the right answers out of this person, which kind of is a frustrating experience. So I had a theory that the Visual Shield install was broken because he couldn't capture any exceptions. So I said, does this code actually work for you at all? Does it give you anything? And I couldn't get an answer. It was very frustrating, and still, So I haven't heard from him in about a week on this, and I've summarized here that there's some things that I'm not going to do on this, and I've asked him for information, and I'm just going to ultimately close this out and see if he comes back. It's a fun way to kind of trick people to grab their attention, is to say, hey, I'm no longer looking at your stuff, and quite often they will jump back. And again, the wording of this stuff is important. I'm not blaming him. I'm saying here I don't have enough information to proceed with this, and it's been about a week. Again, the severity of it means I jumped on quickly, and the fact that I haven't heard anything in a week, I think like maybe something has magically resolved itself. I did a talk in this vein a couple of months ago, and this question came up after the talk. Your review process, are you strong? Are you rigid about it? Are you relaxed about it? Like, there's a kind of like a spectrum of things to consider, and ultimately, I'm the one hitting the merge button, and it's the accountability ends with me. Ultimately, I'm kind of like a pretty relaxed sort of review process, as long as the stuff works. I'm not really concerned about things like commit history and cleanliness. I have very sort of automated code formatters that are easy to plug in and run through later. Like, I don't obsess over the details of the pull request, but ultimately I need like a baseline to make sure that everything works fine. So I think I have a bunch of PRs, fantastic. So for reference, this was Alexander's Google Summer of Code stuff. We are closing out a bunch of the last of the issues, actually, for his work. And so I love Alexander. So he's a .NET developer from Russia, but ultimately he's still studying. And so we teamed up on this issue for basically just expanding out a whole bunch of new APIs to search on repository ID, rather than specifying the owner and the name. And so he's gone through, uses a checklist to make sure that everything is up to date, and so I can come in and see, all right, cool, he's actually gone through all this stuff. He actually threw like 30 pull requests at me at once, and it was amazing. And so last bit to close out, I'm just going to come in here and build as green, so let's do merge. I'm going to leave that one because that's a question to answer. So those pull requests are fairly straightforward. Why isn't that one working? Let's see. Beautiful. I've fought way too much with CI systems over the previous few months. Mono works on one platform and not. Sometimes it's OS X, sometimes it's Linux. It's just annoying. So I'm just going to restart that build and come back to it. So the other one that's coming up is, I forget Madden's real name, but he's been contributing a new feature. So repository invites was something that rolled out in the GitHub API about a month ago. And so it's there as preview support. And like, as soon as it's up in preview support, we're like, cool, let's pull it into the OctoKit library. Let's just figure the stuff out. So when I say that I'm not obsessed about the history, like you can see here, like he's merging in branches arbitrarily. I'm not really that worried about stuff. We can squash things up at the end. Builds not being green, I'm like, not really worried about that. It's more like the end result that I'm curious about. Oh, I've got 10 minutes, cool. And so thankfully, between myself and Ryan, we're generally really thorough with the code review process, especially for like newer people. Calling this stuff out definitely helps us kind of understand, us communicate what we're thinking. Things like just naming stuff. We prefer to kind of be a bit more verbose with our feedback because ultimately, lots of the people that we've kind of dealt with recently, English is not their strongest language. For example, Alexander is from Russia, and so there have been times where I've had to kind of re-explain things, and that's my fault. It's not Alexander's. So where did we end up? Cool. I had a question there about burning out stuff. So there's a convention that I don't know if you guys use at all. So WIP, work in progress. I love people opening up PRs early and saying, like, this is a work in progress, this is the stuff that I'm working on. And so that's just our shorthand for saying this here is still in flight. So I've just said, hey, yep, that was a bit of information that I didn't have before, and so I'll just come up here to the PR title and say WIP. Yep. So I could have just gone and made that change myself without leaving the comment, but I figure, this is what I'm up to. Just, if there's anything you don't expect, drop a comment in. For reference, this PR has that many new lines, so I'm a bit hesitant to kind of go too deep on the stuff while it's a work in progress. Just basic communication definitely helps. The other one, also from Madden, is a much simpler PR. So 2 files changed, 9 commits, about that sort of stuff. But this is related to a concurrency issue that we found in OctoKit. So we support handling 301 redirects. If a repository has been renamed, the API is going to return us a 301. We need to handle that, and there's some stuff in HTTP web request around handling redirects. It will basically take away your authorization header, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens afterwards. So basically, we need to do that handling ourselves. And we've introduced this little bug here where if we're fetching multiple repositories that are renamed, it deadlocks. And so the fix here it's okay. Basically, he's worked out that rather than calling it directly, we need to call it in a different way. I'm still hesitant to take in this fix. Yes, because there might be something in HTTP client that's causing this, and I want to understand the problem before I take in this fix, because it might be hiding a more sinister problem. All right, cool. So I dropped in a message yesterday, say, hey, how's this going? We have to rewrite tests. So rewriting tests for redirects. So I've been helping out Madden a couple of times when things have gone not quite worked. So builds breaking, things like that. There's 2,000 tests, unit tests for OctoKit, and about 1,000 integration tests that hit the actual API. So there's a whole bunch of history floating around that helps me, but ultimately I don't want contributors to be dealing with this stuff too much, and I have way too much knowledge in it, so I might go in and work out what needs to be done for the tests and just give him that patch to kind of understand, to help keep him moving. Cool. Leading on to the last part. So there's a label that we have on the OctoKit project for things that are good for new contributors to dive into. And so an example of that is from Ryan. We have some preview API changes that come up. He's linked out to the blog post that's there, and he describes all the changes that need to be done. It's not that much work, but ultimately calling this stuff out makes it a whole bunch less intimidating for people to dive in and get started. We then link off to the contributing guide, just kind of like, if you're interested in this, this is the steps to take to get started. So that is then a shameless self-promotion for the project itself. So if you're a .NET project and you kind of are looking to kind of entice new contributors, we have this silly little site that's set up. So F# is definitely catching up, but C# is dominating at the moment. JavaScript, we've got a whole bunch of stuff that's there. You'll probably see projects that you recognize on here. Marks.metro was one I was involved with back in the day. The .NET team have put up for grab stuff as well. This also is something that I can review. So it's just a static Jekyll site that gets published up to GitHub pages. Cool, something's failed. And ultimately, people will just submit a flat file, a YAML file on disk with some project details. So this example here, I have no idea who this project is. They've specified some tag to search for, all fairly kind of straightforward. But the build has failed. Ooh, oh, cool. So remember when I say I don't like build servers? This is why. What did I break? That might be related to Rails 5.0, I guess. So let's see if I can manually review this file. Those tags look good. The only thing I still do by hand is check the link, because ultimately when I want users to hit the site, I want them to get something that's easy to follow. Like most people have a GitHub repo, they then use the tag for up for grabs and use that link, but we don't restrict them to GitHub. They can use whatever link they want. This is actually a pretty good sort of list because all the things are easy to find. And so I'm going to merge a broken build, because why not? Cool, I've got about 4 minutes. So I'm just going to skim these other ones while I'm here, because they all seem green. Some of them I will generally drop a comment in to say, like, hey, could you do this instead? So there's this lovely format. So someone's just gone and found the right link and pasted in by hand, but I should really automate this to encourage people to simplify it. Nope, I'm going to leave that one. JMeta, what were we doing here? He's linking to the project root rather than an issue URL. Did I say that? Yes, so again, these are things that have been sitting here for like a good couple of weeks and people haven't got to it. Ultimately, I'm kind of okay with that because this project there's no real interdependencies rush to get things out. But if I was needing to get these things out, I'd probably jump on and say, hey, close the PR, reopen it, that sort of workflow. Yeah, so we're going back to April for things being there. Anyone on the Lucene team here? Troy, all right, I'll come grab you later because I don't know who was looking after this one, but it shouldn't be that hard, let's put it that way. Last little anecdote is I also look after the gitignore project on GitHub. So if you've gone into GitHub and done github.com/new, if you come down here to the gitignore templates, lots of people will, so that list there is coming from a repo on GitHub. And at the moment, we're up to 146. So the fun thing about this is that lots of people want to add stuff for their favorite programming language or their favorite tool. And me as one person, I know a little bit about the programming world as a whole, but at this point it's just utter madness. So I kind of group things up in what's called a new template. So I want to understand the impact of, or the demand for these templates, let's put it that way. So at the moment we're up to 78 new ones, and yeah, there's like Cocoa 2D. I'm just not sure which stuff actually needs to be taken in or which stuff can just sit there. Yeah, I need to give this project kind of a reboot, but ultimately we use it internally at GitHub for the pull request page, and again, like this is just way down my list of priorities right now, so I'm just kind of triaging little stuff as I go along. Yeah. I will stop working now. I'll let you guys have lunch, and ultimately if you guys want ask me any questions, I'll be here. So thank you for your time.